All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so glad to have Jenny here, a great voice. And I'm going to read a little bit of the write up I have, just so you have an introduction to this wonderful, powerful voice. Jenny is a writer, traveler, and occasional business analyst. Her favorite places to wander are Tokyo alleys, Singapore hawker centers, and Parisian cemeteries. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, the Best of the Net Anthology, Best Small Fiction Awards, and the Forward Prize, Best Single Poem. In spring 2024, her debut poetry chapbook, Shiftings and Other Coordinates of Disorder, I love that title, was published by Pinole Poetry. She resides in Canada near the Rocky Mountains and has a wonderful gift of words.
Thank you so much, Dan. And it's so wonderful to be here. And thank you to all the co-pilots for holding this wonderful space every Wednesday. It's very lovely to see. Um, Very happy to have this honor to opportunity to be a featured reader here today. As Dan had just mentioned, my debut poetry collection just came out. It is made by Pinhole Poetry. It's called Shiftings and Other Coordinates of Disorder. It was just released back in May of 2024 this year by Pinhole Poetry, which is a lovely Canadian press. I can't recommend them enough if you're looking for someone to get your words into print. They were very lovely to work with. So I'm going to start this night by reading from this collection, and then we shall move on to a few other things from there. And since it's October, I am going to start with this poem called Framing October in My Bedroom Window. The geese take to sky, redraw themselves into dots and dashings, pencil marks against a bare canvas of cloud. The rabbits stub over the summer held in their earth-colored coats, become whispers of white to match the impending sound of snow. I think of the things that will eventually leave me, while the trees undo their ragged crowns and show the leanness of long winter bones. Thank you. So this collection has poems well, I'm up in Canada, so from Canada, but also poems set in my two favorite places in the world right now, which is Lisbon, Portugal more so, and Japan. So we'll get to those in a little bit later, but I'm going through like a series or a set of poems that I call the home poems. So the next one is called Capsicum. Some nights I look forward to eating alone. No one to tell me that my choice of a single red pepper is not fit for a dinner. An evening of cutting board, knife, and raw fruit by refrigerator light. The shriveled green stem, a connection severed. Scraped out seeds, tisk, 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 fall into compost bin, leaving a solitary heart emptied. But this is really an exploratory act, a simple possibility that something could be wanted as is, plain, bare, undressed. Thank you. And this next poem is a personal favorite of mine in the collection. It's actually made from the discarded lines of another poem, and I'm going to give a little shout out to Sylvia. She's my writing buddy up here in Canada, and she knows exactly where these fragments came from. So, hi, Sylvia. This is called Notes to Myself on Chore Day. When the mountains glower and throw thunder over their shoulders, observe how the heart is a fallible muscle, the way tomatoes redden in their cages, the way cantaloupes weave withered webs on their skin, the way an eggshell turns translucent when held against light. Listen to bitten nails, chase the white rattle of the last aspirin in the bottle, restore factory settings. The washing machine spins the circumference of a yawn, the downward trajectory of settling. Allow an evening teacup to collect the stars. Identify the mechanisms for unlocking a jaw, and swallow sand slink dreams. When your mother calls and says, I have a cream for that, count the number of times a wire must coil and bite to bind a notebook. Collect expired items. Think back to a time when a stamp needed the press of a tongue. 31,536,000, the amount of seconds in a year, factoring gravity, and remember the way a parched August longs for rain. So that is the end. Thank you. That is the end of the home poem series. I'm going to, technology willing, I'm going to share my screen. One of the more recent things I've gotten into is making short poetry films. And I started with a short poetry collection series in 2022 called Compostable Morsels, which was a collection of 6-line poems about things I found around the house. And it kind of snowballed from there. This year, a goal I set for myself was to release one poetry film a month, and we're almost there, and it's going pretty well. And in case you're curious, 5 poems in this collection have actually been turned into short poetry films. So if you're curious more about what's in the collection, you could probably take a look at those.
It still comes down to the sea and what direction we take to cross it. Choices that differ from north, south, east, west. Sometimes I go back to where others insist is my motherland, mother tongue, these things that feel absent in my body. But I've tried to return, not to my grandmother's home. I will never know where that was, because tongues hold so much more than they tell. And some streets can only be found in the memories of those who've walked them. Did she love the summers or winters? Did she notice, like I do, the shrill ache of a cicada's call as it pours heat through the sieves in its body? I do not know her words for any of these things. The language that built the house of her memory will never find its proper place in my mouth. She crossed an ocean for a new life, planted roots, but I am going the opposite way across the water, and still unsure where to land.
I love technology. I am in IT. IT is my day job, and sometimes. um, all right. So we finished the home poem set, and I did say that there are a few other poems set in a few other places. So I am going to read one that I actually wrote in Osaka, Japan. It's called Notes from the Subterranean Art Museum, and I actually wrote there. I like was just, it's literally a museum underground. And I was literally so inspired that I tucked myself away on a bench and then wrote this, wrote the bones of this poem in pencil, scribbled them out. Um, so this is called Notes from the Subterranean Art Museum. The olive grove and the catalyst of mountain gates, my head caught between landscapes, watched by a giant fish with a light bulb eye. There are no pens allowed, no ink to be spilled, only a hidden sweetness, a smell of dried sour plums seeping between the parched cracks in the floor. The sign calls it Portugal, but the colors are altered or gone. There's no sea of red roofs, no slither of blue Teju, no streets tiled in mermaid scales or limestone stars. Only snow, with smudges of peeled orange on the side, swirls of black garbage bags beneath. How can that be the same world? The sadness of a white autumn, a cultivation of small hurricanes down south. Thank you. So this next poem I'm going to read. So I have a new collection coming out next year. I'm very grateful for that. It's called Light Chemical Sea, and it is, I guess they classified it, they ended up classifying it as a flash fiction collection, but I ended up sneaking a few poems in there too, which I'm going to read for you right now. As I've said before, I live up in Canada, and this year was the first year I had ever been able to see the aurora borealis. So I've been writing about that for a little bit now, and so I'm going to read one poem that was inspired by it. It's called When She Thinks About Auroras. When she thinks about auroras, she is behind the wheel, her route gravelled and backwatered by moonlight, unaware she will eventually meet the only deer to cross the road at night. Antlers appear first, tapered branches, a hard landing for snow. Each tip is sharp as a mother's point about leaving family behind. Her hand does not reach to blare the horn. Arrivals and departures need not require borders and announcements. Instead, her foot presses on the brake. The old gray Acura stills, the grumbling engine silenced with a quick twist of the key. Flurries glint in headlights, cold swirling stars who found their fixed point in the sky, their glow magnified by wild moments caught in an animal's eye, reminding her that even the darkest nights can change in the briefest of breaths, and there's too much light to ever feel alone on the road. Thank you. And the next poem matches the theme of tonight of breathe in and breathe out. So I didn't quite plan that, but I think it was just meant to be. So I'll read this poem. This is the last poem I'm going to read, and then I will have one more short poetry film after that to leave you guys with, and hopefully it'll work this time. This poem is called When I Let the Dog Out in the Middle of the Night. Usually he will come in, obedient after fulfilling his duties. But tonight he ignores the open door, lingers at the edge of the deck where porch light slips beneath darkness like a shore into black sea. He looks at me, aging clouds in his eyes, asks if I will join him, asks to go further out into the night. I leave the house, take 3 steps, before hesitation begins to make its inevitable lists. The impending weight of an oncoming workday, the alarm clock that must endure 2 more hours before unleashing its insistent sounds, the vulnerability of bare feet in the dark. So I recall our bodies back inside, leave our longings outdoors to weather down into undistinguishable forms. We return to bed, but refuse our typical patterns, our usual positions for sleep. Instead, his head on my hand, my head against his side. We speak to each other through the small collapses of our ribs, release each other from the definitions of our daily shapes. Goodest boy, quiet girl. Two beasts who understand that even the gentlest of breaths was never meant to be held for so long. Thank you. All right. So I am going to thank you, Dan. So I'm going to cap off this reading with one final poem. If it doesn't work this time, someone please shout it out and we'll try again. This poem is also the last poem in my my collection that I read from earlier. So I feel like it's a kind of a nice cap off to return back to it.
Overseas, I lie awake again, attempt to reconcile the hollows of old debts. I think of inheritance, parents, grandparents, the way my fourth toenail curves instead of flattens, my susceptibility to sleepless nights, the ineptitude of my lungs when I run. And yet there's something deeper, an innocent thievery, absent of intent, a time when my bones stole calcium from my mother's bones, whose bones stole from her mother's bones. How far back does this legacy go? How far have these minerals traveled? My great-grandmother had a streak of white hair even before she crossed the ocean. Perhaps as we get older, our skeletons begin to show. There is something inside me that eats away any desire for stillness, and perhaps this is why I wander. Something in my bones, looking for home.
That is all for me. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be a part of your evening. And thank you for your reading your words earlier. That was wonderful.
You, ladies and gentlemen, and give her some rounds of applause here. Wonderful, wonderful,
Excellent.
wonderful.
Very good.
Whoa,
Nice.
whoa.
Fantastic. Nice combining of art forms.
Thank you.
Really wonderful.
Wow, just wonderful.